Hello, everyone, and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Hammond. We're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the U.S. and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. Russia slams the U.S. for imposing tariffs on India over New Delhi's procurement of Russian oil, stressing that the two countries will continue energy cooperation despite external pressure. Iran says it's prepared for any new Israeli attack, announcing that it's developed missiles with greater capabilities than those used during the recent 12-day war. Germany says China's aggression in the disputed South China Sea and tensions in the Taiwan Strait not only threaten Asia's security, but also undermine international security as well as European interests. North Korea accuses Seoul of having a double character, slamming the country for holding military drills with the United States, while also attempting diplomatic overtures towards Pyongyang. And Myanmar's junta says its troops have captured a town in the country's east, clawing back rebel-contested territory as it prepares to stage elections in December. President Donald Trump has drawn a firm line on Ukraine, saying that the United States will not have troops as part of any deal to end Russia's war on Ukraine. On Monday, he left some room for ambiguity, hinting that the United States' participation in a European-led mission was not entirely off the table. But a day later, in an interview with Fox News, the president gave assurances that American boots will not be on the ground in Ukraine.
You have my assurance. And I'm president. I'm just trying to stop people from being killed. They're losing 5,000 to 7,000 people a week in that ridiculous war.
Now, the position was later reinforced by White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who said the U.S. will help coordinate security guarantees for Ukraine, but the guarantees being discussed cannot be NATO.
The president has definitively stated U.S. boots will not be on the ground in Ukraine, but we can certainly help in the coordination and perhaps provide other means of security guarantees to our European allies. The president understands security guarantees are crucially important to ensure a lasting peace, and he has directed his national security team to coordinate with our friends in Europe and also to continue to cooperate and discuss these matters with Ukraine and Russia as well.
Now, after ruling out sending U.S. troops into Ukraine, President Trump hinted that the country could provide air support as part of any potential agreement to help in Russia's war. Now, the details of this support, he said, were still being worked out as Washington and its partners continued discussions on military assistance for Ukraine. The president also issued a warning, saying that the conflict could become a rough situation if Russian President Putin does not cooperate on peace efforts. It was also announced earlier that Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead the newly formed joint commission that will work on forging security guarantees as a proposal for Kyiv. The commission will be made up of U.S., Ukrainian, European, and NATO officials. And President Trump said European nations will be the first line for providing security guarantees.
I think that the European nations are going to take a lot of the burden. We're going to help them, and we're going to make it very secure. We also need to discuss the possible exchanges of territory, taking into consideration the current line of contact.
Meanwhile, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer floated the idea of an international peacekeeping force in Ukraine, ranging from a few hundred observers to a contingent of tens of thousands. Now, much of the focus now is on security guarantees for Ukraine, in which European nations, along with U.S. support, are working out commitments to provide protection without granting NATO membership. President Donald Trump described Monday's meeting with EU and NATO leaders as a very good early step toward ending the conflict, now in its fourth year. But he also signaled difficult compromises ahead. He also says that Zelensky must accept that reclaiming Crimea seized by Russia in 2014 and joining NATO are right now impossible. Now, Moscow, in turn, is pressing for Kyiv to withdraw forces from Donetsk and Luhansk and to formally recognize Crimea as Russian territory. On Tuesday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that land swaps are often critical in conflict settlements and that Russia has never talked about seizing territories.
I would like to emphasize once again that we have never talked about the need to seize any territories. Neither Crimea, nor Donbass, nor Novorossiya as territories have ever been our goal. Our goal was to protect Russian people who lived on these lands for centuries, discovered these lands, and shed blood for them. They founded cities in Crimea and in Donbass, such as Odessa, Nikolaev, many others. Cities, ports, factories, plants.
Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky left Washington on Monday without a signed deal, but with some progress. He cited plans for Ukraine to purchase $90 billion worth of American weapons through Europe as part of new security guarantees. And later during the day, President Trump revealed that he called Vladimir Putin during the summit for a 40-minute conversation. The president says he's already started arranging a face-to-face meeting between Putin and Zelensky with the possibility of a later three-way summit involving himself. Now, Zelensky has expressed openness to such a meeting, but the Kremlin downplayed it, saying talks will stay at the level of senior negotiators. Meanwhile, reports stated that Russian President Putin has proposed holding a peace summit with Zelensky in Moscow, a proposal that Zelensky has reportedly rejected. Still, as the White House seeks ways to move a workable peace agreement forward, the stakes are enormous, both for Ukraine's survival as well as Europe's security, and of course, most important of all, America's credibility and standing. Now, it's no secret that Donald Trump built much of his recent political brands on social media with quick insults, catchy nicknames, and viral posts that often dominated the headlines. But now, one Democratic governor is taking those same tactics and turning them back on the president himself. California's Gavin Newsom isn't just sparring with Trump on policy, he's trolling him online, mocking his allies and fueling speculation about his own political future for 2028. Here's a look at how exactly Newsom is now trying to beat Donald Trump and MAGA at their own game.
A new war in the United States is erupting. One that does not involve weapons or troops, but the internet and keypads. On the digital front lines, California Governor Gavin Newsom is taking on President Donald Trump,
because Donald Trump,
not with speeches or policy papers, but with sharp memes, biting satire, and viral posts. He's trying to reframe the national conversation. His social media accounts have become a magnet for viral moments, turning Trump's own playbook back on him. The governor's official press office now posts in block capitals, signs off as GCN, a riff on Trump's DJT, and even brands the president with nicknames like Taco Trump, short for Trump always chickens out. But behind the satire, there's a strategy. Newsom has allegedly rebuilt his rapid response operation to mirror Trump's,
required an unprecedented approach,
especially after clashes over Los Angeles wildfires and the president's decision to deploy the National Guard against protesters. Trump's latest push for red states like Texas to draw new congressional boundaries early to shore up Republicans' odds of holding the House in the midterms has only added fuel to the fire. So each attack from Trump has only fueled Newsom's online counterpunch. In recent weeks, Newsom's team mocked the president by using Star Wars and Simpsons memes. They've also used the platform to fact-check his claims and crowned Newsom as America's favorite governor. To be clear, in Trump's social media world, Gavin Newsom is often mocked as news scum. But the California governor has hit back, repeatedly referring to Trump as tiny hands. And he says it's simply mirroring the president's own style.
I'm just following his example. If you have issues with what I'm putting out, you sure as hell should have concerns with what he's putting out as president.
But the Democrats' trolling is not limited to Trump. It also involves his vice president, J.D. Vance. Newsom's office has mocked the vice president as, quote-unquote, just dance Vance. Before President Trump met Ukraine's Zelensky in the White House earlier this week, his office said it anticipated another showdown, sharing a morphed image of Vance. Newsom's team has also dredged up old photos to add to the ridicule. Besides, several other of Trump's MAGA supporters have also been targeted. In one instance, his office has mocked DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, as cosplay commander. But his tactics to make Trump taste his own medicine has left many speculating over whether this is just trolling or a test run for 2028. Newsom has so far not officially said he would be running, but his strategy acknowledges a reality. Trump's social media tactics work, and Democrats may need them to win over voters in the upcoming elections. In an era where politics is played out as much on social media as on the campaign trail, Governor Newsom's strategy is appearing to be simple: beat Trump at his own game.
The Trump administration is tightening immigration rules once again, and this time it's not just about documents, but about ideas. From now on, immigration officers will not only scrutinize paperwork and vet social media posts, but also words and even opinions. A new guidance by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services says that officers must look for what it calls anti-American activity. The department recently announced that reviews of applicants' social media accounts will now include checks for anti-American or anti-Semitic views. Officials say America's benefits should not be given to those who despise the country or promote ideologies hostile to its values.
U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services is committed to implementing policies and procedures that root out anti-Americanism and supporting the enforcement of rigorous screening and vetting measures to the fullest extent possible. Immigration benefits, including to live and work in the United States, remain a privilege, not right.
The policy update didn't give a specific definition for anti-Americanism. It only mentioned that this included those who support anti-Semitic terrorism, anti-Semitic terrorist organizations, and anti-Semitic ideologies. But it pointed to a section of the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act for examples of anti-American ideologies. The act bans certain people from becoming naturalized citizens, including members of the Communist Party, those who write materials opposing all organized government, or those who wish to overthrow the U.S. government by force or violence. The department also said that cases where officers have discretion in deciding applications will also come under its purview. This includes applications for green cards from within the United States or requests for temporary protected status, where someone in the U.S. on a short-term visa can apply for a deportation amnesty. The announcement immediately stoked confusion and alarm, with online forums debating what counted as anti-American. The new rules come as customs and immigration officials ordered officers to check for good moral character on the applicants before giving out citizenship. But good moral character officials specified they would check for an individual's community involvement, family caregiving and ties, educational attainment, stable and lawful employment, and tax status, among other things. Now, since taking office, Donald Trump has moved aggressively to deny or revoke short-term visas for people deemed to go against U.S. foreign policy interests, especially on Israel. The Trump administration has accused students and universities of anti-Semitism over protests against Israel's war in the Gaza Strip, charges denied by activists. In April, the U.S. administration revoked or changed the legal status of hundreds of international students, only to reinstate them several weeks later. And then it halted student visa interviews in May, later bringing in the social media vetting measures in June for international students applying to study in the United States. Now, on Monday, the State Department said it revoked 6,000 student visas since January. And Indians are the hardest hit group, as people from India make up the largest international student group in the United States. And with stricter vetting of social media and moral character, the new rule could put them under sharper scrutiny. So with the latest guidance, the Trump administration has set in motion a policy that blurs the line between national security and personal expression. It's raised fears of bias and subjectivity, leaving the future of thousands of visa applicants hanging in the balance. And now to the Middle East, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appears to be losing friends over the prolonged war in Gaza. In the latest, Australia has lashed out at the Israeli leader after he claimed the country's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, was weak. For years, Australia has considered itself a close friend of Israel, but the relationship has unraveled since Canberra announced it would recognize a Palestinian state. On Tuesday, Netanyahu escalated the war of words, saying history would remember Albanese as a weak politician who betrayed Israel and the Australian Jewish community. Now, Australian Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke came to Albanese's defense, calling Netanyahu's comments the outburst of a frustrated leader lashing out.
The issue of that you go to particularly there about strength versus weakness. Strength is not measured by how many people you can blow up or how many children you can leave hungry. Strength is much better measured by exactly what Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has done, which is when there's a decision that we know Israel won't like, he goes straight to Benjamin Netanyahu. He has the conversation. He says exactly what we're intending to do.
Now, Prime Minister Albanese himself said he did not take the comments personally, but insisted Australia would continue to state its position on the war in Gaza.
I don't take these things personally. I engage with people. Diplomatically, he's had similar things to say about other leaders. What I say is that Israel, of course, increasingly there is global concern. And global concern because people want to see an end to the cycle of violence.
Now, it's important to note, in the 1950s, Australia became a refuge for Jews fleeing the horrors of the Holocaust. And reports suggest that Melbourne once hosted the largest population of Holocaust survivors outside of Israel. But relations between Australia and Israel began to fracture late last year after a wave of anti-Semitic attacks in Sydney and Melbourne. More recently, Netanyahu was enraged by Canberra's announcement that it would formally recognize Palestinian statehood next month, following similar moves by France, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Now, Albanese has stressed that recognition would be conditional on commitments from the Palestinian Authority, including that Hamas would not have a role in the future state.
A two-state solution is humanity's best hope to break the cycle of violence in the Middle East and to bring an end to the conflict, suffering and starvation in Gaza. The international community's vision for a just and lasting peace in the Middle East always encompassed two states, living side by side with internationally recognised borders.
Now, the dispute has only deepened after Australia on Monday canceled the visa of a far-right Israeli politician who's also a member of Netanyahu's coalition, saying his tour would spread division. Israel retaliated a day later by revoking visas held by Australia's diplomatic representatives to the Palestinian Authority. Now, this escalating tension comes as Israel finds itself increasingly isolated while the war in Gaza continues to grind on. Also, ties with France have hit a new low after Paris, too, backed a Palestinian state. On Tuesday, Netanyahu accused French President Emmanuel Macron of fomenting anti-Semitism. French officials fired back, calling the claim abject and erroneous, adding that it was time for seriousness, not conflation and manipulation. In fact, other allies have also taken aim. Last week, New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon said Netanyahu had lost the plot. But Prime Minister Netanyahu is not without support. The United States continues to back Israel and said it will not recognize a Palestinian state. And Latvia, too, maintains that recognition would not help resolve the conflict. So as the war in Gaza drags on, with Israel now planning for a conquest of Gaza City, Netanyahu now faces a ceasefire plan, one that Hamas has already agreed to. And whether he accepts it or holds out for more, his decision will shape not just the future of the conflict, but also his own standing on the world stage. And we end today with growing tensions between the United States and Venezuela. In a dangerous escalation, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has announced the deployment of more than 4.5 million militia across the country. Maduro's remarks followed reports suggesting that the United States has deployed guided missile destroyers off Venezuelan waters. The move aligns with the Trump administration's bid to cut down drug trafficking. And the U.S. has also raised the bounty on Maduro's arrest to $50 million from the previously imposed $25 million. Now, onlookers are wondering if this latest standoff is a prelude to something bigger. Our final story explores.
4.5 million militia members, prepared activated and armed, will be out marching in cities across Venezuela. This is Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's special strategy to counter threats from the United States.
This week, I will activate a special plan to guarantee coverage with more than 4,500,000 militiamen throughout the national territory. Militias prepared, activated, and armed.
He has also activated the new peace squadrons to guard Caracas and patrol its neighborhoods. These units comprise the police, the military, and community organizations.
The militia is integrated into all peace squadrons. With the plan we are developing to activate the militia throughout the country, from north to south, from east to west, and all defensive capabilities so that no one will ever touch Venezuela.
But why is Venezuela up in arms? And what is this US threat that Maduro is referring to? It started with US President Donald Trump's vow to wipe out foreign cartels trafficking drugs into American borders. Washington launched anti-drug operations across Venezuela. The US also announced a bounty on Nicolas Maduro, doubled it to $50 million, and seized assets linked to him.
The DOJ has seized over $700 million of Maduro-linked assets, including 2 private jets, 9 vehicles, and more. Yet Maduro's reign of terror continues. He is one of the largest narco-traffickers in the world and a threat to our national security. Therefore, we've doubled his reward to $50 million.
The US says Maduro is one of the world's largest drug traffickers and a threat to its national security. It accuses Maduro of leading Latin American drug trafficking gang Cartel de los Soles. So America wants Maduro behind bars. The Trump administration has also imposed sanctions against the Maduro government and Cartel de los Soles and accused the gang of shipping hundreds of tons of narcotics into the United States.
The Department of Justice and State Department are announcing a historic $50 million reward for information leading to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro. Maduro uses foreign terrorist organizations like TDA, Sinaloa, and Cartel of the Suns to bring deadly drugs and violence into our country.
The US military has also reportedly deployed several naval vessels, including guided missile destroyers, to waters off Venezuela. 4,000 military personnel have also been reportedly deployed. The Trump administration says the action is part of its broader anti-narcotics campaign. Caracas called these actions provocative and hostile. Maduro described the US threats as extravagant, bizarre, outlandish, and called them rotten rehashes. As Maduro remained defiant, Washington even targeted the Venezuelan economy. The Trump administration announced a 25% tariff on imports from the countries buying Venezuelan oil or gas. In 2020, during Trump's first presidency, Maduro and his allies were indicted by a US federal court on drug charges, including those of involvement in a narco-terrorism conspiracy. The Venezuelan government, however, denies these accusations.
Those same immoral people are trying to say here that our commander-in-chief, Nicolas Maduro, is a drug trafficker, that the Minister of Defense is a drug trafficker. It is disrespectful to the people of Venezuela.
Washington and Caracas have not had formal bilateral ties since 2019. The White House says it does not see Maduro as a legitimate president and that the 2024 elections, where Maduro retained power, were a sham. Even the Venezuelan electoral authorities failed to provide a detailed vote count of the polls to back his victory claims. The country's opposition leader, Edmundo Gonzalez, who called out the farce election result, had to leave Venezuela. He alleged that he was forced to accept Maduro's victory. So far, Maduro's rule has done little to favor Venezuelans. Over the past 10 years, about 7.7 million Venezuelans have fled the country. This is due to shortages of essential goods and skyrocketing inflation. Venezuela continues to reel under a growing drug menace and economic isolation, and Maduro's growing rivalry with the US only seems to be adding to the woes of its people.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank all of you for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching.